When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat.
Today's Gospel narrates two miracles performed by Jesus. These stories teach us about faith, desperation, and the miracle of life, as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. Let's recall the situation. Jesus returns across the lake and crowds welcome him ashore. Among them is Jairus, the synagogue leader, who falls at Jesus' feet, pleading for help for his dying daughter. Just a few verses later, we meet a woman suffering from bleeding, believing that touching Jesus' garment could heal her. In both cases, Jairus and the bleeding woman experience a form of isolation. Jairus, a respected synagogue leader, feels helpless in the face of his daughter's illness. He probably also faces dilemmas about how to behave in front of the observing crowd. The bleeding woman, on the other hand, lives on the margins of society, excluded due to her ailment. Doesn't this sound familiar? How often do we ourselves feel helpless in the face of problems that seem beyond our capabilities? How often do we feel alone, even in a crowd, because our problems seem to define us? But here's the beauty of this story. In both cases, Jesus responds with love and compassion. He not only heals, but also restores social bonds. The woman is healed not just from her physical ailment, but also lifted from social isolation. Jairus' daughter is resurrected and Jairus regains his faith. Jesus says to Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe." This phrase is like a lifebuoy thrown to us amidst the stormy sea of everyday life. It's so easy to succumb to fears, but Jesus reminds us that faith has the power to overcome obstacles. And what about the woman with the bleeding? She believed that even the slightest contact with Jesus could heal her. And she was right. Jesus says to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." It is said for a reason that faith can move mountains. Let's consider how often in our lives we have begged for a miracle, not realizing that we are the miracle. Each of us has the power of transformation, not through grand gestures, but through small touches, acts of kindness, words of support. Even a smile can be medicine for the soul. Isn't it miraculous that in times when the world seems to rush unthinkingly, we can pause here, in this community, and feel the touch of God's presence in our lives? The final thought from today's gospel concerns community. Jesus did not act in secrecy, but was always surrounded by people. His actions had a profound impact not only on individuals, but also on entire communities. Today, gathering, we remind ourselves of the strength of the community of believers. We are a reminder to each other that our faith, our prayers, and our collective actions can perform miracles. Let this gospel be a reminder to us that no matter how difficult life is, we are not alone. Jesus still walks through our Galilean waters, ready to respond to our calls, heal our wounds, and restore us to community. Not through Wi-Fi, but through faith, which is our deepest connection to what matters most. May these words from the gospel inspire us to deeper faith, greater openness to God's action in our lives, and to being part of a community that strives together for a better world. Amen.